because we're going to have a little coffee and talk about whatever comes to our mind. Ooh, it's been a busy last few days. I've been recording the post-flop section of the Tournament Masterclass. That's finally coming along. We have a pretty firm date for when it'll be released. That'll be late November. So that is good. I'm excited about that. It's been about a year-long project. One thing I've learned is that I do not like year-long projects. They take a lot of effort, a lot of work. The PowerPoint's like 1,200 slides long. Goodness gracious. When you try to do something right, you try to do something super in-depth, sometimes it becomes overwhelming, and it's definitely become overwhelming. So anyway, glad to have that done. The recording part's the final phases. We have to make all the content, which we spent a lot more time on than we normally do. Then we record the content. We have the content reviewed by a few people. We record the content again, have it reviewed by a few people again. Then if it's good, it's good. So we're on the final leg. Woo, it's good. Good morning from Brazil. Hello, hello. Welcome. Vamos. All right, today we're going to be talking about straddling. Straddling is something that happens in cash games. It does not happen in tournaments. So what happens is, in a cash game, sometimes people who want to gamble a bit will opt to straddle. A straddle is essentially where you put in a third blind. So small blind posts their blind, big blind post their blind, and then the person to the left, normal under the gun, straddles. They put in 2 times the amount of the big blind. So if you're playing $1, $2 no limit, it's $1, $2, $4. Sometimes a straddler will straddle for more than that amount in some casinos. Sometimes they can straddle from various positions. First, we're going to discuss the standard, boring, big blind straddle, where small blind, big blind, straddle, right? We're not going to talk about the other scenarios first. Aren't straddles a fool's play? Well, of course they are. Well, usually. The big blind straddle is essentially always a fool's play. And the reason for that is you lose money when you are in the blinds. Every other position, you win money. So, why would you want to post money that is out of position, right, with a random hand? You just essentially make yourself have one additional bad losing spot at the table, right? And you do not want to have one additional bad spot at the table, okay? So you should not straddle. However, there is one random time you should do it. That is when everybody else at the table is doing it, and you want to try to essentially make the pots bigger because they will not otherwise get big. Essentially, let's say you're playing 500 big blinds deep at 1-2, and nobody's playing a 500 big blind pot. You might as well go ahead and kick up the stakes to where you're playing 250 big blinds deep, right? However, if you're playing 500 big blinds deep and all of your opponents are just lunatics, they're raising to $14 pre-flop and 5x potting the flop and all this nonsense, you don't need to straddle because you don't want to make the pot big, right? You'd rather have a big post-flop advantage. Straddlers are essentially good for people who think their post-flop edge is small. So if you think you're bad, then you should typically agree to the everybody straddle thing, unless, of course, everybody is weak and tight. So is a typical straddle 2 times the big blind? Yes, typical straddle is 2 times the big blind. Sometimes there'll be additional straddles. Small blind, big blind, straddle, then double that amount, re-straddle. Sometimes double that amount, re-straddle, right? We're going to talk about the basic one first, though. So, common question here is... Okay, so first off, we know we should not do it unless everybody's doing it, okay? And if everybody's doing it, you only want to really agree to that game if you think you don't have a big post-flop edge and the stacks are very deep such that you could not otherwise get in the money. If you're playing 100 big blinds deep, like say you're playing 1-2 with a $200 buy-in and everybody has $200 in front of them for 100 big blinds, you don't really want to straddle because then you're just playing 50 big blind poker. Understand that when you're straddling, or when there is a straddle, the stakes are doubled, okay? So that means you need double the bankroll, you're going to have double the variance, all of that, right? Now, there may be some justification saying that the straddlers are going to play particularly poorly, and I'm not, or, I don't know. There's some justification that says you may have a slightly bigger edge if the bad players are straddling, which is fine. Like, you want the bad players straddling in general. But realize that whenever people straddle, the stacks get cut in half. So if a lot of your edge comes from post-flop skill, which a lot of it will in deep stack cash games, you lose that, right? Okay, so let's see. I had a question sent in. This is a question by one of the viewers, by the way, one of you. Should we be limping when there is a straddle? Well, if there's a big blind straddle, you have to ask, what has actually changed here? Well, essentially, there's one additional player in the pot who has yet to act who has money in the pot. Okay? So in that scenario, what has changed? Well, now, if you limp, there's more people who get to see the flop for free, right? So if that's the case, then you, in theory, should be a little bit tighter than normal. You should not be looser than normal when you are not in the straddle, right? You should actually be a little bit tighter than normal because there are more players in the pot. So you should not be doing any limping. You should just be raising with a good, strong, linear strategy. For those who showed up late, I've already stated we're going to talk about all the other straddles, okay? Be patient, everyone. Goodness gracious. All right. We're talking about the standard one first because that's what most people do in most casinos. That is the only one allowed by law in a lot of casinos. Okay, so you should be raising tighter when there are additional players in the pot who have money invested, who have yet to act, who have yet to look at their hand. So you should generally tighten up your raising range. Also, the straddler, especially if they are straddling very voluntary, it's not like everybody at the table straddling, the straddler will very often have a wide strategy, a loose aggressive strategy, right? They wanted to gamble. They wanted to get their money in, and straddling will help them do that. Understand that if your opponent is not going to fold and is looking to gamble, you want to start with generally stronger hands than normal, right? Because they're not going to fold a whole lot, okay? So that is very, very important to recognize that essentially you should play tighter when there are straddles at the table for various reasons. As John says here, you always expect the straddler to 3/4 bet you when it gets back to them. Yeah, and a lot of them do, right? So if you expect them to 3-bet and 4-bet you because that's just how they operate, then sure, right? Then in that scenario, you should in turn play good hands that can withstand a 3-bet very frequently. If you think the straddler is going to call a lot against a pre-flop raise, but will raise a ton if you limp, maybe there is merit for limping, right? You always want to maximally exploit whatever your opponent does incorrectly. And if your opponent is going to just like blindly blast it whenever you limp, but it's going to play normal if you raise, well, maybe you do want to start getting a little bit tricky with limps. From the small blind and from the big blind when there's a straddle, understand that if they fold to you, you're going to be out of position. You should always be trying to chop in this instance if they'll let you. Usually the straddler won't do it because they came to gamble, right? If you come to gamble, you typically don't want to chop. But you want to be chopping when you're out of position, and you're going to be out of position in these scenarios. So that's definitely the case. Also, you have to develop a limping strategy if you want to play more than just the best hands, because you can't really justify raising all that often from out of position. I mean, this is going to start to develop a strategy that looks like the GTO charts we have at poker coaching for when everyone folds to you in the small blind, where you're just raising mostly the best hands, limping a lot of marginal hands, and then also raising some junk. But you are doing a ton of limping. Philonic here asked about something to the effect of, what does our ranges look like? We have extensive GTO preflop ranges that discuss 3-bets, 4-bets, 5-bets, etc. with various stack depths at pokercoaching.com. Also in the app. Make sure you get the Poker Coaching app. Okay? Get the Poker Coaching app. All of that is there if you are a member. Some of it's available if you're not a member. Straddle games normally play loose in your games. For example, 2-3 the bike plays very loose and straddle heavy. Should you be adjusting your raising amount to a larger size? If your opponents are going to call your raises with all sorts of nonsense, then yeah, raise bigger. Understand though, if you're playing 2-3 with $300 stacks and someone's making it $6 pre-flop very frequently for the straddle, you can raise to like $25, but realize you're only playing 50 big blinds deep, right? So you should be playing mostly pretty strong hands. Essentially, you can look at the GTO charts and just presume you're playing 50 big blinds instead of 100 big blinds, right? And that's going to be a pretty strong adjustment. Really though, playing with 3 blinds, which is what the straddle is, doesn't really change the game all that much, except for you have to be a little bit more cautious in the later positions, right? Because you're raising into 3 people instead of 2. When you're raising into 2 people, you can raise with a much wider range than if you're raising into 3 people. Makes sense, right? So not a whole lot changes when the big blind, or when the there's a third blind straddle, right? Small blind, big blind straddle. And straddling in that scenario is just horribly bad because you lose money from the small blind and the big blind, and you make money from every other position at the table, including under the gun. So why would you want to take under the gun and make it immensely unprofitable when it could be profitable by just folding a ton and only playing good hands? So straddling under the gun is really bad. Don't do it. Now let's talk about the other most common straddle. It's a button straddle. Now there are various types of button straddles depending on the way the action goes. Typically though, it's again small blind, big blind, and then 2 times the big blind, so 1, 2, 4, right? Or as we see here, like 1, 2, 5. That's what George says they play in his game. When you straddle from the button, one of 2 things can either happen. Either the small blind has to go first, or under the gun goes first. Everyone acts around to the cutoff. Button gets skipped. Small blind, big blind go, then button goes last. Figure that one out, right? So either the common one, I think, is a Mississippi straddle. Did it come from Mississippi? I don't know. Basically, small blind goes, big blind goes, under the gun +1, all the way around to the cutoff. Cutoff goes, button goes, and then you play normally. That's actually pretty advantageous for the button. Now, when should you actually make this straddle? I don't have firm math on this. I often make this play when we're playing about 150 to 200 big blinds or deeper. And the reason is because it completely screws the blinds. Completely screws them. Why? Because they have to go first. This should result in the blinds often limping, calling the straddle. Because if they raise, they're raising into everybody else at the table. And they don't want to raise into everybody else at the table, but they also don't want to fold because they're getting good odds. So they should develop a reasonably wide limping range with hands that flop well, the nuts, right? Like they should be limping a very, very strong range in this scenario. And it's going to be difficult to play against. What a lot of people do wrong, though, is they limp with everything, or they fold everything. Most people actually fold everything. And when I say everything, I mean the vast majority of hands, right? And that's very, very bad because essentially they're just taking their blind that would normally be somewhat profitable. I mean, it's unprofitable, like they could defend it decently well, and they're just like giving away all of it or 80% of it or something like that. So that is just horribly, horribly detrimental for the blinds. I actually don't like to play when there's a button straddle. I don't want to introduce a button straddle. Like if you're playing a game and it's playing fine and normally, and you're on the button, don't say, ooh, I want a button straddle. Don't get that going because it completely wrecks the game because now you, if everybody else is going to start button straddling, you don't get to defend your blinds well either. And that's a big problem. So button straddling is horribly bad for the game, and I would highly recommend not playing that. The other button straddle version where the blinds go last besides the button is not nearly as bad for the blinds. It's probably the way they should do it in theory. But most of the places that they do it like that, the Mississippi straddle, the straddle goes last, pre-flop, and the small blind goes first, which is horribly bad. Okay, so in that scenario, what should we start doing? Well, this changes the game a lot because the button gets to go last, right? It's very powerful for the button to go last pre-flop and on the flop and the turn and the river, right? So now, you can't really blindly raise from like the cutoff with 35% of hands or whatever when the button's already straddled. Like let's say everyone folds you in the cutoff, we're playing 1, 2, 4. You can't make it $12 because now the button's going to call $8 more with like everything, right? Because they're in position, they're closing the action. It's basically as if you're in the small blind and raising into the big blind. Pretty much the same thing. So in that scenario, you have to raise much bigger than normal. So if you normally raise to, let's say, 3 big blinds, you may want to raise to like 4.5 big blinds or 5 big blinds when you're playing very deep. Because that's going to start to cut down on the very good pot odds the player on the button is getting, right? So you need to raise bigger across the board. And you may actually want to develop a limping range. Because when you're the same thing as when you're in the small blind when they fold you, right? Again, look at the poker coaching GTO charts. You'll see a pretty wide limping strategy is advocated and a very polarized raising range is advocated. Now, your polarized hands are not going to be like the absolute worst hands. They're going to be stuff like, I don't know, King 8 suited and King 8 offsuit or something like that. I'm not actually sure. I haven't studied this scenario a ton. But I do know when you're raising, you want to be raising your nut hands and you want to be raising the hands that are on the bottom of playability and you want to be limping all the hands in the middle like Queen Jack suited and King Jack offsuit and stuff like that. Okay? Okay. So you have to develop a limping strategy in that scenario, and it's a pretty tough spot to play. And it actually should, in theory, result in the game being very weak and tight. Why? Because the player on the button just has a massive advantage. So if you have a massive advantage and your opponents are not going to do anything about it, you might as well do it. But it's just like horribly bad for the game, and I don't want to play in a game where the optimal strategy is for everybody to be tight. That sucks. That's a bad poker game. You do not want a bad poker game. What in the world is this nonsense? Let's ban this person. All right. Okay. Can you straddle from other positions? Yes. Of course you can. So let's say the cutoff wants to straddle. Again, various rules for various casinos. If the button has to go first, it's actually not all that terrible because you completely screw the button. Because normally button goes last, now they have to go first. If the button gets to go basically last or close enough to last, where cutoff straddles, under the gun goes first, around to the hijack, cutoff gets skipped, which often is what happens, button goes, small blind goes, big blind goes, then cutoff goes, it's actually not so bad for the button then, because the button gets to go close enough to last. But if the button has to go first, straddling in the cutoff is not like horribly detrimental. Some people straddle like the hijack seat, right? Same story. Hijack goes, or hijack straddles. If the cutoff and button get to go close enough to last, it's not that bad for them. If they have to go first, it's pretty bad for them. However, when you start straddling from the hijack, now the cutoff and the button can do a lot of limping, and then they're going to get to realize their equity very well, right? They're going to get to see lots of flops, and they can just raise. Because now if they raise, they're going to be in position against you. So it's almost like they're raising from the button and you're in the big blind and you're kind of screwed, right? So really the only time it makes any sense whatsoever to straddle is when you are exactly on the button or when you're exactly on the cutoff and the player on the button is very tight and you're also very, very deep stacked. Okay? There's an echo. Is there an echo? Well, if there's an echo on Instagram, fortunately, you have many other better options to watch this show. Go to youtube.com/pokercoaching or twitch.tv/Jonathan Little. Why would there be a law about straddles? Because that's how the government works, especially in the United States. In many casinos, they can only spread specific games that are very clearly defined by the law because they're regulated by a gaming commission. So in a lot of places, they can't spread games like deuce to 7 single draw or deuce to 7 triple draw or Badesi or Badoogie or Raz or limit hold'em or no limit hold'em with an ante or no limit hold'em with 3 blinds or no limit hold'em with a button straddle. They have to follow the rules very, very specifically. That is what happens sometimes when regulation takes place. That said, you have places like Nevada where you can just do anything you want, basically. So there are some places where there's this like horribly, lamely regulated, and then there's other places where it's fine. Like basically players do whatever you want as long as everybody agrees. So why is there a law? Because, you know, government. Let's see. Should you raise bigger when people are straddling? Yeah, so first off, there's more money in the pot and people play looser, so the answer is generally yes, you should raise a little bit bigger. All right. What about shorthanded? In a four-handed game, it turned into 1-2-5 with the guy on your right straddling under the gun and the button. So again, when they straddle under the gun, that's great for you. When they straddle on the button, it's terrible for you, right? So, I mean, figure that out. Typically, you do not want to allow button straddles in your game. I'm telling you, it's not good for the game. If you're three-handed on the river, if someone bets, third guy calls, and it's on you, do you call tighter because you're against two opponents? Yes, definitely tighter, because whenever the first guy bets, they have a polarized range usually. Whenever the second guy calls, or the third guy calls, as you call them, when third guy calls, they have a good hand. So if you're against a good hand and a polarized range, you should fold a lot. The fact that you're getting the pot odds does not matter. You made it out of your procedure. Welcome. And then you had Waffle House. Enjoy it. Congrats. Strudels are great. One time I went to, where do they have the good strudels? Is it Budapest? There's the Budapest Strudel House. Anybody been to the Budapest Strudel House? It's very, very good. I thought it was good. They made this giant dark cherry strudel right in front of us. It was amazing. Should you attack Splashy Straddlers with a linear range or a polarized range? All right, so this depends on how they're going to play, right? If they're going to raise, re-raise, play every pot, you would rather be playing with a linear range because you want to just have better hands than them, right? If they're going to play normal poker, then you want to have regular polarized strategy. But like polarized strategy means you're limping some, right? If you're not limping anything, then your whole raising range is just linear, right? What I recommend for someone who's trying to get into online poker, but you live in a state where you can't play online poker for real money. I mean, realistically, what's the right answer to this? Play on an unlicensed, unregulated, illegal site and don't worry about it. Play for tiny stakes. Play for small amounts of money so that if they do screw you, you will not actually get screwed for much money. Funny enough, one of my friends yesterday, I don't know if I'm allowed to tell this story. One of my friends yesterday was playing on WSOP.com, and like 9 out of 10 people somehow got timed out of the site for like 2 hours. So he blinded everybody out, as you should, and he won the tournament. Now he's gonna get a. Now he's gonna. I don't know if I'm allowed to say. Forget this story. Forget I said anything. Isn't that crazy though? Like site breaks, and I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, some people were still in there playing. Some people weren't. Can't just cancel the tournament. But you probably should give refunds. Crazy stuff. Are there any online games with straddles? Some also, like you'll see in high stakes games, sometimes everybody will agree to minimum raise under the gun or whatnot. So there are games with straddles, but not really. There are some like 3 blind games and whatnot, which basically is a straddle. If the game is good and everybody wants to straddle, isn't it worth it to straddle to stay in the game? So you're saying they're going to kick you out of the game if you don't straddle? That usually will not happen in any licensed, legal, regulated casino. In licensed, legal, regulated casinos, they can't kick you out for not straddling. However, they can, in Nevada, for example, change the structure of the game. Plenty of times. At 10-20 no limit, we'd make it 10-20-40. Plenty of times, right? And if a player didn't want to do it, very often they would have to leave, which is probably out of line in theory, because probably everyone should have to agree, but it is what it is. But again, like, if your options are leave a good game or straddle, you'd rather straddle. Understand, though, that straddling takes away your edge for the most part. However, you may want to play double the stakes with a lower edge, right? That could be perfectly viable. Obvious example of this, I used to play 5-10 and 10-20 at Bellagio, and I would go back and forth between the 2 games, not for like bankroll concerns, but because sometimes one game was better than the other, right? 10-20 is way better than 5-10. We're obviously going to play 10-20. If 10-20 is terrible, we're going to play 5-10, right? If you want to play in bigger stakes, just go up. Well, so this is also an interesting thought process, right? Like imagine you're playing 1-2, and then all of a sudden at 1-2, some lunatic rich guy comes and wants to play $3,000 deep and wants to 4x straddle. So now your 1-2 games become 1-2-4-8, right? Or 1-2-4-8-16. Would you rather play $1,000 deep at 1-2-4-8-16 against some lunatic and a bunch of 1-2 players who don't know what they're doing? Or would you rather go up and play 5-10 or 10-20 against good players, right? You'd rather play against the bad players. So if you are playing the smaller stakes games and you find a random lunatic who wants to just blast it, you'd rather do that than move up in stakes. Should you consider the $5 straddle like the big blind in order to decide your buy-in? No, look. You don't want to be putting money in poorly. When you straddle, you're basically giving away like $2 or $3 out of that $5 straddle. So you want to give away $2 or $3 every single time? No. No, don't do that. No limit hold'em has... Oh, wait. New Hampshire. New Hampshire has strict rules. No running it twice, no bomb pots, etc. Yeah, some places have very strict regulations and some places don't. You figured a good strategy is to limp every hand. No, you do not want to open limp because that lets the straddler realize their equity very well. When you limp, what happens is the straddler just gets to check a lot, right? And when the straddler gets to check a lot, they're not losing any money. They get to see the flop. So you want to be raising to force the straddler to fold or put in more money poorly. When you limp, you let the straddler play well. And you don't want the straddler to play well. You didn't realize the stream was only about straddles. This show is called A Little Coffee. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 a.m. Probably 5 out of 6 times I will be presenting on a specific topic. And you all can ask questions, I'll answer if I feel like it, but don't be mad if I don't. And then, 1 out of 6 times we'll do an Ask Me Anything, and you can ask me whatever questions you feel like. You can play anywhere for real money at any time. Do you have Bitcoins? Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of unlicensed, unregulated, illegal sites that will let you play with Bitcoin pretty easily if you know how to make that work. I have a video on it at YouTube. It's not so difficult. Make sure you don't just put it from your Coinbase account into the site, though, because that's going to get you banned on Coinbase. Because it turns out Coinbase doesn't want to operate with illegal, unlicensed, unregulated sites. They try to do things legally and legitimately. So you have to be smart about it. I talk about this in the YouTube video. Google Jonathan Little USA, how to cash out. Just do the reverse process for how to cash in, how to buy in. All right. You love the channel. When is the best time to check raise? When you have the range advantage Well, no, not necessarily. So you want to check raise mainly when you have the nut advantage with a polarized range. Does that answer the question for you? Did I say range advantage again? No, slow down, Jonathan. I had too much coffee already. You want to check raise when you have the nut advantage with a polarized range. There you go. That's going to be your best made hands and your draws in most scenarios. Okay? I discussed this thoroughly in the Tournament Masterclass with lots of examples, lots of PIO charts, lots of Jonathan Little poker coaching, implementable strategy charts, etc. Geolocation system crashed yesterday. Sure. GGS straddles in all games. Sure. Could it be a good idea to stay out of button straddle games? Depends on how they play, right? The fact that people should play tight in them does not necessarily mean they will. In the high stakes games, like everybody realizes, all right, they're straddling, they're in position, we're screwed. So they fold everything. But in small stakes games, it could certainly be fine to play those games if nobody plays it properly. If you 4-bet kings and your opponent jams, should you fold? Should you fold the second best hand in your range? No, of course not. If you fold the second best hand in your range, you're folding up basically everything. Unless, of course, you're only 3-betting aces and kings, in which case kings is a bluff. But do you really want to be bluffing kings pre-flop? Probably not. What's our standard opening size with a straddle? Typically to about 3.5 to 4 times the straddle amount. Okay? Let's see. We already answered this. If I don't answer your question, be patient. As you see, I'm 4 minutes behind, okay? Straddles get raised 90% of the time. It's the worst proposition in the whole place. Yes. I agree. Add a payment method like Skrill. If you want to pay for anything at pokercoaching.com using Skrill, NetTeller, Bitcoin, Ethereum, well, ETH, whatever, Decred, Litecoin, Beanie Babies, Silver Bars, whatever you want to use to pay for pokercoaching.com, send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com, and we'll set you up. If you want to give us money, we'll take it. All right. Check out pokercoaching.com, by the way. I'd appreciate it. If you like cash games, if you like this straddling discussion, you'll love the 14-day cash game challenge that is right there in Poker Coaching Premium. We have a challenge section with lots of challenges, and we're adding more and more stuff to that on a regular basis. What's the thinking of players that straddle? Like, what are they trying to achieve besides juicing up the game, making more money in the pot? They're just trying to get more money in the pot. They want to gamble. They came to play roulette, okay? You came to play poker, a skill game. They came to play roulette, a gambling game. So, if straddling keeps the roulette player in your poker game, maybe you do straddle, right? It's not another good instance of a time where maybe you should straddle. If the options are the super fish gets up and leaves, or you play double the stakes, you'd probably rather play double the stakes. You're a cash game player and adjusting to the times and trying to play online tournaments. What's a good way to start? I mean, trying to figure out, oh, you're trying to play online tournaments because you think cash games are no good? No, cash games are still very good. If you're a good cash game player already, I would highly recommend you continue just playing cash games, right? The thing is, online tournaments typically run at relatively small stakes. If you're going to try to play high stakes, you're going to be playing against really good tournament players right off the bat. So I would generally recommend you just keep playing cash games. If you're a good cash game player, you're winning at cash games, why would you want to change that at this point? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. That said, if you want to learn any new game, start small, study a lot, grind it out. Bet on Drew in the chat. Good morning. Hello. Hope you're having a great morning. All right. Let's see. What is a bomb pot? A bomb pot is where at some standard time, usually when the dealer changes every 30 minutes, maybe when they take the time break, I don't know, whenever something happens, usually every 30 minutes, every hour, something like that, everybody will put in some amount of money pre-flop, usually 5 big blinds, 10 big blinds. Cards are dealt, you just go straight to the flop. Small blind goes first. Notice the small blind and everybody else put in their 5 big blinds pre-flop. This is clearly really good when you're in position, clearly really bad when you're out of position. This game heavily favors people who understand post-flop hand values. Turns out most people don't. They think overpairs are good in a 9-way pot. Overpairs are not good in a 9-way pot very often. They're good if you can bet and pick up the pot. They're not good if you bet and someone raises. So you have to learn how to play multi-way very well. And very often that just means check and fold because you put in 1/9 of the pot, which means you're supposed to win the pot or realize 1/9 of the equity in the pot. All right. Should we re-straddle when someone straddles on our right? No. because now you're putting in 4 times the amount of money dead from out of position. Like, that's even worse. Like, yeah, you kind of screw the straddler, and you kind of screw the big blind and small blind, but everybody else at the table, primarily the button and cutoff, are going to get to really screw you. So you're just lighting your money on fire if you're restraddling. In your game, there's no blinds, only a mandatory $5 blind from the button. Should we use a different strategy? Yeah, you should play tighter, because the player on the button gets to call very, very often. That's basically when the button is also the blind. That's really, really bad for you. Unless, of course, that money is not live. But even then, if the money's dead, it doesn't make a difference. Like, this is just an ante. If this is the ante that goes in the middle of the pot, like in I don't know, short deck or something, whenever they play without everybody anteing. If they do something like that, then it's still just really good for the button. So everybody should play tighter. Whenever you straddle, some of the players playing at a higher will end up playing at a higher limit than they are comfortable with. Sure, maybe. The thing is, though, is like if people are just going to play kind of tight and play mostly good cards, you're not really winning a ton of money off of them. It's not really what you want to have happen, right? You'd rather win a lot of money off them because they're splashing around and being bad. Yeah, so Mark, this is called a Mississippi straddle. Oh, you mean ultimate last? What does ultimate last mean? We already discussed the Mississippi straddle, where small blind goes first, big blind goes all the way around to the button, they go last. That is by far the best option for them. Now, when you say ultimate last, does that mean small blind limps, big blind limps, under the gun raises to 15, folds around to the small blind, so you don't have to put in 15 first. Small blind goes, they re-raise to 45. Big blind folds. Initial raiser makes it 70. Skips you again. Small blind goes all in. Big blind goes all, or initial raiser goes all in. Now you have to decide what to do. If that's what ultimate last means, meaning you don't have to act at all until the very, very end, like clearly that's just insanely good for the straddler. Like that's just broken. I mean, that's a dumb game. Because I mean, then you just sit there and you don't have to do anything. I doubt that's what you mean though. I think you mean probably just Mississippi straddle. Actually, so you actually have the bad version. If you're saying under the gun goes first, if under the gun goes first and they fold around to the cutoff axe, they skip button, small blind goes, big blind goes. That's actually like the most fair way to do the button straddle. Unless, of course, the button acts in turn. You know, that would be relatively fair too. But at least that way, when under the gun goes first, it doesn't screw the blinds nearly as much because the blinds don't have to go first. If there's a straddle, don't be afraid to fold if you don't have something decent. Yeah. Just watched the Daniel versus Doug video. Didn't know that had been posted yet. Good. When is the game? I think it starts in a week. Wanted to put that early in case you felt like gambling. That said, if you lose, don't be mad at me. We're probably going to lose a bet if you follow my recommendation, just because that's the way math works. But we'll make some equity. What is a realistic but more of an aggressive build-up strategy? Time versus big blinds. You're starting with 750. You want to challenge yourself to get to 5K. I mean, look, Paul, you can be as aggressive as you want. There were some people back in the day who did like a run-it-up challenge where they're going to have 3 buy-ins. So, in theory, if you wanted to use that, you could buy in for $200. You could play 1-2 no limit online. Try to run it up to 5K. You're probably going to go broke. But, I mean, if you don't care about going broke, what's it matter? That said, if you want to give yourself a reasonable chance of never going broke, what I would recommend doing is keeping about 30 buy-ins. Whenever you get up to 30 buy-ins for the next highest stake, move up there. If you get down to like 15 buy-ins at your current stake, move down to the lower game so you have 30 buy-ins at that game. So basically you always keep 30 buy-ins in your current game roughly. Between 15 and 30. If you get down to 15, you move down. If you get up to like 60, you move up. And you'll have a pretty tough time going broke. Where is the tournament masterclass? It's currently on my computer being made. You got a trash bag full of Beanie Babies? All right, that's probably worth at least half a month of poker coaching. How does a straddle bet followed by a blind bet affect your play? So this is a straddle and a restraddle? I mean, I don't know. If it's a blind bet, then the person has 100% of hands. So they're basically straddling again, right? What if you have a larger edge short stack versus deep stacked? So this basically presumes you're bad at poker, right? If you're bad at poker, you're bad at deep stack poker, and you want to play shallow stacked, first off, you should be buying in for the minimum every time, right? So like you don't have to buy in for 100 big blinds in any game as far as I know. You can buy in for like 20. So you might as well buy in for 20 if you think you're really, really bad at shallow stacked play. That's what I would recommend as opposed to straddling and all that. You really just don't want to put in money out of position dead if you don't have to. Do you think it's better to play tournaments versus cash game because it's full of bots? First off, I don't think it's full of bots. But also, cash games are tough online, for sure. Completely agree. Tournaments are definitely softer. Tournaments are softer because you have to generally know lots and lots of skills to be good at them. And most people don't know lots and lots of skills. They know only a few skills. Loads of love and energy from Colombia. One of my best friends is from Colombia. Hello, hello. Cash games are great because you can leave when you want. Indeed. How much of your bankroll do you take to a 1-2 table? Read jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. We discussed that thoroughly. We already answered this question. If we already answered your question, please don't type it in again. The answer to this question, though, I got to presume you missed it the first time, was you call tighter because one player has a good hand when they bet the river, and the other player has a good hand when they call the river. Well, first player has a polarized range when they bet the river. Second player has a good hand when they call. So if he gets a good hand and a polarized range, you should very much fold. Is the Tournament Masterclass on premium? Not yet. I have to record it. We already talked about this, everyone. So many questions for everyone. It will be in Poker Coaching Premium, though. What about re-straddling when you're on the button? So what? Under the gun straddles, you can re-straddle on the button? Sure, but again, stacks are getting really shallow. You don't want to be straddling on the button when you're shallow stacked, because then there's just like no skill in the game to begin with. That's the problem is when you're shallow. And once, like say you're playing 1-2 with $200 stacks, it goes 1, 2, 4, 8. So now you're playing 25 big blinds deep. Like there's no edge there, or relatively little edge. How do you handle a table where every hand someone ends up all in? Play good cards, right? Only 37 likes. Oh, everybody doesn't like straddling. I realize we turned off half of the people here today by talking about cash games. Sometimes that's how it goes. Everyone's not going to like everything I do. All right. Sharing the Bankroll Bible link doesn't work. I think people are not allowed to post links. Let's see. jlpoker.com/bankroll. Let me know if that went through. Looks like Periscope is dead now. I'll try to figure that one out. If you want to study the poker coaching winners community, today, study session, they're reviewing real JPB $16,000 win. That's going to be starting in 20 minutes. Thanks to Louis Philippe for doing that. Louis Philippe's grinding the poker coaching study hard. I appreciate it. Good job, good work. So anyway, that's it for straddles. You really just have to ask, in any scenario when the game has changed, what has actually changed here, right? And if there are additional players in the pot who are invested in the pot because they have money in the pot, you got to play a little bit tighter, right? If you're going to be out of position against someone because they straddled the button, got to play a little bit tighter, right? So you always want to ask that scenario. And like in any game, like say someone limps under the gun, what changed? Well, now we're against someone who's put some money in the pot. They probably have something decent or something really good, and we have to adjust our strategy accordingly. We always have to adjust your strategy accordingly. Oh, yesterday, yeah. Brad Wilson did his first cash game webinar for poker coaching members. That'll be up on the site soon. Listen, everyone, if we do a live webinar on pokercoaching.com, it will always be up on the site relatively soon. Understand, it might take a day or two, but it'll be up on the site relatively soon, okay? It'll be right there in the classes section. We also have a 14-day cash game challenge. Really, if you are looking to get good at cash games, sign up for Poker Coaching Premium. I have an entire cash game masterclass there. It's very, very thorough, very in-depth, lots of quizzes, lots of interactivity. We just hired Brad Wilson, world-class cash game player, and we're doing a lot to help all of you with cash games. Because I realized we were lacking cash game content a little bit. So we wanted to build it out a bit. Oh, it's already up. See, look, we knew it'd be up already. Right there in the classes section. Where can you find info about which tournaments to buy in, like compared to the payout? Georgia doesn't really work like that. I don't even know what you're asking. Your buy-in should be determined by your skill compared to your opponents, and also the number of people in the field, and also your risk tolerance. Okay? You can't find the cash game class masterclass on the app. We do not have the courses on the app yet. We are still working on that. That'll be up at some point. Currently, if you want to watch any of the courses, the long interactive courses with, like cash game masterclasses, I don't know, a bunch of videos and a bunch of quizzes. We don't have that on the app yet. That takes a bit more programming. So anyway, go to the website and use that for now. Again, the app is a work in progress. Check out the Poker Coaching app, though. It's in-depth work in progress, and we are getting it done. We have lots and lots of GTO charts. We just got a hold of 100, 150, and 200 big blind cash game charts. I think that's what we got. Those will be going up in the GTO section very, very soon. Loads of charts, more than we could ever even use. And I'm excited to have all this stuff going up. You did not know where to find the past webinars. They're in the Classes tab. We have a few tabs on Poker Coaching. We have the Classes tab. That's where old, like, individual hour-long webinars go. We have Play and Explain. That's where either like hand history reviews go or live streams. So we have a bunch of live streams there. I mean, if you're a Poker Coaching member, we have, gosh, I don't know, hundreds of hours of private streams that we did for the Poker Coaching members, including some of the best players in the world who are streaming for us, like Draft Ganger, Bert Stevens, #1 player in the world a year or two ago. Super crusher. He's streamed for us a few times so far, with much more to come. Do you want to say hello? Oh, you want to take my coins. Can you say hello?
Hello.
What's your name?
Sam.
Thomas. Yeah, Thomas. Can you blow a kiss?
Mm.
Can you say love you?
Hello.
Can you say good luck?
What?
Good luck. What are you going to do today? You going to go outside? You going to play? Yeah? Yeah? For some reason, Thomas loves this poker chip. This is a $5 poker chip from the Bicycle Casino. It has Jerry Buss on it. Please, it has Jerry Buss on it. Thomas loves this chip. I don't know why. Here, I'll take this. This is his train. This is the train named James. There's a blue one named Thomas. Are you going? Okay, he's done. He's off it. Okay. Okay. Here, take this. No? Okay. Bye. Bring that back when you're done, please. Oh, you're leaving? Come here, bring my chip back. Search for limpers on Jonathan Little. It really changed your game. Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Here, do you want to take your train?
No.
Okay, bye. There's your train. See you later. Oh, goodness. Do I have any plans to stream in the future? Not really. I'm pretty busy. But maybe at some point. Maybe at some point. Lexi Gavin does a great job when she's coming out with another webinar. I don't know. I think she makes a webinar about once a month. You're going to bet on the NFL. Okay, sure. Have fun. From what I understand, NFL is like actually one of the worst things to bet on because it is a highly bet on thing. And anytime, like the way apparently you beat sports betting markets is to find things that are drastically underbet. That way the line is not accurate because the line gets very accurate as more and more money is bet on it. It's generally thought that the population has a good idea of what they're doing, at least the money invested has a good idea of what they're doing. And a lot of people bet on NFL, and therefore a lot of sharp people bet on NFL, therefore the edge is relatively low. The potential edge is relatively low. And often they rake it. They rake it the full minus 110. All right. Say you realize that poker was a dying ecosystem, but you want people to buy your content. Isn't that contradictory? First off, I don't think poker is a dying ecosystem. If you see anything, it's currently booming at the moment. But also, just because something is dying, even if it is dying at a slow rate, it's not going to just be gone tomorrow. You can make plenty of money from poker. So, no, right? It's like saying, if you sell fishing poles, is it bad to sell fishing poles if people are catching fish? No. You're allowed to sell your fishing poles. Nothing wrong with selling your fishing poles. Especially if the game is like, okay. What if the place is slightly overfished? That's where you have to start asking. I don't think poker is anywhere near slightly overfished at the moment. But say you do think poker is slightly overfished, is it out of line to sell a fishing pole still? Well, if you don't sell a fishing pole, someone else is going to sell a fishing pole, that's for sure. So as long as it is legal to sell a fishing pole, you should still be able to sell a fishing pole. Now, the government may step in and say you can't sell a fishing pole because your places like drastically overfished and all the fish are going to die. I don't think that's going to happen with poker ever, meaning there's no regulatory body that's going to say you can no longer teach people to play poker. But no, I don't have a problem with it. Let's see. 1-2 cash game, straddle from under the gun or button almost every hand. How many big blinds do you recommend buying in for that session? You consider yourself better than most of the players? I don't know. Depends on how deep everybody else is, right? You're going to find that buy-in amount doesn't really matter, just like as a static number. It depends on where the stacks are at the table. I discussed this in Jonathan Little on Live No Limit Cash Games. There's a whole section on how much to buy in for and where to sit, which table to sit at, etc. Basically, if the big stack is on your left, you want to have a very shallow stack. If the big stacks are on your right, you want to have a very big stack. If the bad players are on your right, you want to cover them, whatever that means. But what a lot of people do wrong is they just sit down with the maximum every time, and that's definitely an asinine strategy. I mean, there are plenty of times where I used to play at Bellagio. I would play 10-20 no limit, show up. Sometimes you sit down, I'm sitting down with the minimum, $800. Probably happen like 10% of the time, not very often. Most of the time, though, you get a good seat, you have the fish on your right, they're sitting there like 5K, you buy in for 5K, right? So it's not a function of, I want to cover everybody, I want to show how macho I am. It's like, no, you want to make good decisions. And if, let's say, you have a bad seat to begin with, 3 really good players on your left, no bad players at the table, you just don't have much of an edge. Say the good players on your left all have like $5,000, players on your right have 800, and they're all pretty good. You want to have the minimum, because you're going to lose chips to the player on your left, and you're going to win chips from the player on your right. And the way that works is you're going to lose $800, and you're going to win $800, so it's going to like break even, right? But if you're losing $5,000 on the left and winning $800 on the right, that's clearly very, very terrible for you. Small stakes game, should you believe if your opponents raise the river? Probably. What's the 14-game cash game challenge we're talking about? Every day for 14 days, or if you want to binge it, you can do it too. You can get a piece of cash game content that you consume, discussing all sorts of things, like pre-flop raising ranges, dealing with 3-bets, 4-bets, etc., playing post-flop. Basically, it gives you something structured to study every day for 14 days that will help you get substantially better at cash games. We also have a 30-day tournament challenge. We have a 3-betting challenge because I know a lot of you have trouble with 3-bets. So make sure you check all that out. You're glad that I'm answering you. Well, that's what we're doing here. Why are the raise sizing so much bigger at small stakes games compared to big games? Because people in small stakes games are worse at poker. Mike, this is honestly the answer. You're not going to like the answer, but you should be using small sizes in small stakes games. However, there's a rake at small stakes games, which means that you typically do want to raise bigger when there's a big rake in the game. You want to play a tighter range and raise bigger when there's a big rake. Notice this is the opposite of what a lot of people in small stakes games do. They play a wide range and they limp a lot. So they just pay a ton of rake. And they lose. Everybody loses because they play a ton of rake. You have to play tight, aggressive, raising to like 4 big blinds pre-flop at small stakes games. High stakes games, the rake is much smaller proportionally, which allows you to play a wider range, and you can use smaller raise sizes. However, if there's no rake or the rake's comparable, you should be raising small in all the small stakes games. Webinar with Jonathan Jaffe tonight at 7 o'clock. Ooh, that's great. I love Jonathan Jaffe's webinars. We have a full calendar at pokercoaching.com. You can check out all the webinars that are coming up. We have, I think last week we had 4 webinars going on, so lots of live content for all of you where you can get online, ask some of the best players in the world your questions in real time. You joined Premium this week, you're really loving the high-level stuff from Giraffe Ganger, Jonathan Jaffe, Michael Acevedo, etc. Good. Glad to hear it. All right. Michael, it is not the Cash Game Masterclass broken up. Some of it is the Cash Game Masterclass. Some of it is other parts of pieces of content we have. It's the content organized in a way that's very structured that will help you get good in a structured, linear way. Although, to be fair, you probably want to go through the Cash Game Masterclass too. You need to get past a $7 rake on a $30 pot in your 1-3 game. Well, I'll tell you what, Wolverine Poker, you can't beat that game. It is literally impossible to beat $7 rake if they're taking that $7 rake every hand at 1-3 no limit. Hate to break it to you, nobody's going to win. Turns out, when they rake a lot, everybody loses. Instead of just the bad players losing, everybody loses. I will tell you how to beat that game, though. If you want to beat a very, very high-raked game, the optimal strategy is to play really, really tight. Really tight. And then that way, you don't play very many hands, so you don't actually pay much rake. And when you do play a hand, you win the pot the vast majority of the time. So if you get it all in every hand you play, I know that's not practical, but let's say you get to put in $60 out of your stack every time you play a hand. It's always like aces, kings, queens, jacks, and ace king. Let's say you win it a lot of the time, right? Now, the pot's $120 on average, roughly. You pay your $7 rake, you get back like 70% of the pot, 60% of the pot, something like that. So you put in 60, you're going to get back 70. So you're making $3 per hand that you play, which is, reasonable. Not great, but like reasonable. It's better than the alternative of paying loads of rake, right? Do people call your all in with any draw or pair when you're short stacked? Depends on how short you are. It's a pot odds question, but usually. Dennis, check out the stream or the Twitter by Rob Yong. Rob Yong on Twitter, RBYONG. Not exactly sure what his Twitter name is, but search Rob Yong Twitter poker. It'll come right up. He had a video about the exact decreases they were doing. Follow him if you play on Party Poker. He's the man. There's a membership you can buy for your friend for their birthday. Yeah, send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com. We will set that up. I'm telling you, if you want to buy pokercoaching.com in any way, you want to buy it for a gift, you want to buy it with bitcoins or silver or dollars, or whatever you want to do, send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com, and we'll figure it out. Going through the masterclass right now and you're loving it. Good. In small stakes, with no rake, should you raise small? Yes. Absolutely. If you take down the pot pre-flop, there's no rake, right? In most games, there is no rake. That's correct. So I don't really like this type of thought process, a lot of people say. You often play 1-3, but it plays like 5-10. Like, what does that even mean? It plays like a nitty 5-10 game? Because if you have a 5-10 game, that's the exact same game as the 1-3 game. The 5-10 game will play like a, 15-30 game then, right? So I really hate this terminology when people say, it's 2-4, but it plays like 5-10. It's like, what does that mean? It means your opponents are super fish? People at 5-10 aren't super fish. Hate to break it to you. You're saying that the swings you'll encounter are like 5-10? Okay, make sure you're properly bankrolled, right? Like, who cares? What's that matter? Just play properly bankrolled. So what's the purpose of saying that? Should you ever straddle? We already talked about this, Shuby. Go back and rewatch this. This is what this whole previous hour was about. We've been talking about straddles for 53 minutes. Oh my gosh. Are people going to be playing very many hands if you only play the top 4 hands? They shouldn't be, but if they're playing 1-3 with a $7 rake, I'm just going to throw it out there. Probably. How can you submit hands? I'm not sure. Send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com. We sent an email for all of you Poker Coaching Premium members to submit hands for me to review. So far, reviewed like 50 or 60 hands for all of you. If you're a Poker Coaching Premium member, send in a hand. I'm happy to review it. You can also go back and watch all the hand reviews I did for everybody else, too. The raise sizes are comparable to 5-10. So you're playing 1-3, but people make it $30 pre-flop. Great! They're super fish. But I'm telling you, nobody at 5-10 makes it $300 pre-flop or $100 pre-flop. Nobody does that. That'd be awful, right? So you're saying that people just use big bets. If people use big bets, that's fantastic. It's almost like the blinds don't exist. If the blinds don't exist, just sit there and play the nuts, right? You don't think he realizes he comes off as rude sometimes. I hate to break it to you, but to succeed at poker, you must have thick skin. You must be able to accept comments quickly, critically. Don't take anything personally. If you consistently get sad or angry because someone says something that you don't like, turns out you're not going to like very many people and you're going to be sad all the time. Understand that I'm trying to give information as quickly and as efficiently as I can because we have literally hundreds of people right now who are trying to ask me questions. Sometimes that implies giving an answer, getting it out of my mouth, and moving on. If you don't like it, feel free to leave. Like, is that rude to say if you don't like it, feel free to leave? It's true. If you don't like me, feel free to leave. Go do something else. I want you to enjoy your life. If you don't like me, don't watch me. I don't care. It's not going to bother me. Go watch somebody who you like. It's okay. But I try to give information as quickly and efficiently as I can. If you ask me a question and it takes 1 second to answer, I'm going to answer it in 1 second. If it takes me 5 minutes, you see, sometimes we get behind because I sit here and I find a question. It takes 5 minutes to answer, right? Don't be offended by stuff. Get over it. All right, you're playing cash games in a weird place. There's one table. It doesn't stop for 24 hours. Okay, sure. Get in there and gamble. What does a linear range and a polarized range mean? A linear range is a range consisting of just your best hands. Imagine aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens, nines, ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, king, queen. All the best hands, right? A polarized range would be a range that contains your best hands plus some bluffs. Mainly like aces, kings, queens, jacks, and ace, king. Like really good hands you're always happy getting in with. And then stuff like ace 6 suited, ace 7 suited, ace 5 suited, king 8 suited, ace 9 offsuit, king 10 offsuit. That way, if you're playing a polarized range, your opponent doesn't know if you have the nuts or nothing. When you're playing a linear range, your opponent knows you have something good, and they should fold a lot. However, if you do raise only a polarized range, like let's say 8s are better, ace 10 and better, and king queen and better, if you get re-raised, you should actually fold out some of those hands that are pretty good, like 9s and 8s and 10s and ace king, and ace 10 and ace jack. And you don't really want to be folding out hands that are pretty good, which is why using polarized strategies is often ideal in most scenarios besides when you're specifically out of position or when you're against calling stations. Keep being rude and truthful. Yeah? F the trollers. I don't think that's a trolly statement. Like, you're allowed to tell someone that you think they're being rude. Understand, though, that I just don't care all that much. Because I know plenty of you enjoy me being me. I'm not trying to be somebody else. I'm trying to be me. The no snowflake zone here. This is a no snowflake zone. I do my best to not offend people. However, at the same time, I'm not going to sugarcoat the fact if somebody asks me a silly question that it's a silly question, and I'm going to tell you why really quickly. Basically, I just explained what a polarized range is. I did that very nicely, right? A lot of people know what a polarized range is. Probably, if I had to guess, 90% of people here know what a polarized range is. But, like, you know, I'm happy to explain it. I get that some people don't know that. But if you ask me a question I literally answered 5 seconds ago, what do you want me to do, you know? If you have $100 in chips and queens in middle position in a 1-2 game, somebody raises to $12, what do? Go all in. Do you call that $12? No, I'm going all in. You don't want to fold, and you don't want to go all in to scare them out, do you? I'm either going to make it $28, or I'm going to shove. I'm probably just going to shove with a stack. Typically, whenever someone raises, if you are shoving for between 5 to 8 times that amount, that's a pretty nice shoving stack size. However, I'm jamming with way more than queens here. I'm jamming like pocket 7s. I'm jamming ace 9 suited, maybe even any suited ace. I'm jamming like ace 10 and offsuit and better. And I'm also jamming most of the best hands. I probably 3-bet small with a few hands, like aces, kings, and a sporadic bluff here and there, like maybe king 9 suited, maybe king jack offsuit. Jamming king queen offsuit. So you see, here's a good example of a polarized strategy, right? I'm re-raising small with exactly the nuts and exactly some bluffs, and I'm jamming everything that's very good but in the middle. Should you ever worry about keeping your ranges balanced in small stakes? It depends. I look horrible in the mornings. I look horrible most of the time. I hate to break it to you. Would you all believe I used to be a child model? I used to be cute. I looked a lot like my baby James. You really liked my video about how I became a pro. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I was super serious even when you won your first big one. You got to be serious, you know? I'm playing this serious game here. What stakes do you play online? Typically, we're playing whatever medium to high stakes tournaments. Usually, what I'm doing currently on Sundays now is I'm playing every tournament that's $200 to $1,000, roughly. So, you know, not super high stakes, but $200 to $1,000 buy-ins. And then just like playing 12 tables at a time or whatever, grinding it out. I've had 2 close calls last 2 weeks. We took an 8th place in a $1,000 tournament last week, and I think a 9th place the week before. It's like, ugh. Almost. Why don't you play cash games online? Because cash games are tough online. What stakes cash games do I need to play to make the same amount that I make playing tournaments? Like 5-10 no limit? The problem is, though, I don't know if I can beat 5-10 no limit online. Because first off, the games don't run a ton, and the people who are playing are often very, very good. Did they let me back on ACR? I don't know. I haven't tried to log in. I have no desire to play on sites that do not like people who speak openly and honestly. They probably think I'm rude. Oh, goodness. Fun times. You gotta jump. Well, I gotta jump too. We go for an hour. It's been an hour. It's been a good time talking to all of you about straddles. Hope you all have a great day. Hope you have a great, Friday? Hope you all have a great weekend. Hope you enjoy yourselves. Have fun with the straddles. Don't make the straddles yourself, but have fun with the straddles. Understand that when you put money in the pot blind, that's not good for you. You want to know what your cards are before you put money in the pot. Hello from Argentina. Good morning, good morning. All right. Again, if you want to study a little bit more right now, go to pokercoaching.com, go to our Discord. That's located in the community tab. Louis Philippe is going to be reviewing one of our students' $16,000 wins. So go check that out. Thanks to Louis Philippe for doing that. Thanks to everyone else for being here. All the regulars. I know there's lots and lots of people here who are here very frequently. We have Muggy, Andrea, we have Kevin, all of you. I appreciate all of you here on a regular basis. If you enjoyed this, click like, click subscribe. Hope you win all the money. And I'll see you all bright and early on Monday, 9 a.m. for another episode of A Little Coffee.